Hey Ben, welcome to Automate All the Things. I'm excited to have you.
Hey, Aaron, thanks for having me. So glad to be here. Looking forward
Uh,
to it.
yeah, this is weird because we speak in different mediums, right? So I've spoken to you on Slack, we hang out on Twitter, I've seen everything you build, but this is actually, I think, today the first time we're actually speaking. So it means a lot. So I'm really excited to have you on, and I'm stoked of what we're about to build.
Same here. Thanks for having me. It's like I watch your videos, I follow you all the time, and then to finally it's like really a surreal moment. It's like this an internet celebrity I talk to. I'm actually on a stream with. Pretty fun.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I think like both I've used your tutorials, you use mine, and so I'm actually like I think it's a good place to meet. We're actually going to show off something that you built that I'm really impressed by, and we're going to walk through it step by step. But before we get into to fangirling over each other, how about for folks who don't know who you are, a quick
Yeah,
introduction into Ben and what you do?
totally. So my name is Ben, and I've been building for the web a long time. I'm old, and so I think I started building for the web in 2001. And I learned by coding, actually, GeoCities, Zynga, Blogspot, and then learning to code, building custom WordPress themes and templates, and then discovering Webflow in 2014. And for me, that was kind of a big entry into the no-code space outside of GeoCities front page, whatever, and really discovering the power, like realizing I could code this, but my gosh, the time that this saves me, and sort of became a really big Webflow fan, was involved in the community, and ended up working and talking with Waldo and some support team members a lot. And I made this site that was just like, hey, I think I would like to work at Webflow. And uh, Vlad messaged me one day and was like, hey, want to work at Webflow? And so I worked there on the support team, but I also co-host a no-code podcast that I started with Matt Varghese and Lacey Kessler. Lacey, who's at Adalo, Matt, who is the CEO of 8020. And so we talk no code on our podcast, but it's super fun to be here hanging out with you talking about it now.
Yeah, so if folks can just grab the Visual Dev FM website, drop it in the chat, and I'm curious, like who has used I remember GeoCities, but I would assume and I would think that most people watching this back or in the chat have never heard of it. So uh, um, and it's interesting. I think like we remember no code before no code. And I think what's interesting about you is you actually are a developer. You write code, and we're going to actually show some of it off today. So before we kind of jump in, I'm curious, like what saving time was an argument, but what actually attracted you to building apps without code, especially apps that you could have built custom.
Yeah, it really is. It was, for me, the biggest thing was speed, right? It was return of investment. When you're building one, and then just not loving the WordPress platform. Like, I'm not here to throw hate at WordPress, but
Right.
you write a bunch of PHP, and it's so local dev environments and all the work. It's so intricate and detailed. And I found that, like, when I worked with Webflow, I could have more projects in flight at a time. So it was also like greater return on investment, better speed, and just ease of use. And then the way Zapier just kind of coming around, and the way it
Mhm.
interacted with those tools, and the kind of power it gave you, where you're like, I don't have to write my own backend processes anymore. I can literally just hook this up, click a few buttons, and boom, done. I can hand these things off. It just, the power that it gives you, and it's such an easy to navigate way, in a very speedy way. I love that.
I love how we're like, yeah, no code is great, and now we're about to spend the next 45 minutes digging into like JavaScript on Webflow. It's like, yeah, no code is
Yeah,
great. Have you seen these 200 lines of code that we're about to like dig into? It's gonna be great. But I think what I'm excited about is actually like merging of the two, right? So
yeah.
that's why I was really excited when you showed me this project, and I was instantly like, hey, let's show off how you did it, because I hope it inspires people to be like, oh, like I'm building things, I understand every building block, and there's this connective tissue with a little bit of code that I can create to truly build applications. So we're gonna jump in a moment here, and we're gonna go ahead and kind of show off what you built. But I'd love to kind of give us an intro into what it is, like what got what in Ted Lasso obviously super fun, but like what is it? What motivated you to build it? And then we'll jump in and do kind of an example here in a moment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that motivated me was so discovering NoCodeAPI, the tool,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of seeing some of their new features that came out, specifically being able to secure an endpoint to a domain. So one of the challenges that you have when you build Webflow is that you have a backend and a CMS, but there's no backend where you can process things
Right.
out of sight of the user. So if I want to make an API call, I've got to like expose a key or I have to do
Right.
something here. Um, and so the motivation was finding this and being able to like, I can connect a form and I can deliver results to Zapier, but then how do I get that back to the front end to display it to
Right.
the user? People were using member stack and all these things and trying to like point you to pages and tie an ID to a result, and like it was a mess. And discovering this, I realized what NoCodeAPI does is it gives you an endpoint that you can say it only works from this domain. It doesn't
Right.
require a key. They keep your key in their system and make those calls for you to make it easier. So I was like, oh hey, I can make a call,
Right.
build an app essentially, deliver information, get information back, and then display it to the user with a minimal amount of code. And I was just like, I've got to try this. This is gonna be fun. And then I had a teammate at Webflow who was looking to try a similar thing. I was like, hey, two birds, one stone. Let's see if we can make it happen. And so this was kind of my exploration into that.
We've already lost 80% of people here with like no code endpoints and authentication and restricting domains. But I think I don't want people to be intimidated here. We're about to just build a Webflow website. We'll talk about why you can't do this natively in Webflow. And frankly, all of this uses no code tools, right? The whole stack. And actually, it's a very common use case, right? So if you want to create a calculator, a pricing calculator, anything that has any kind of calculation that you want to return to someone, this is a good build. So let's actually jump in. I think people will be much less scared when we show what the end product is and talk about the kind of the steps to get there. So I'm going to go ahead and share with everyone. You should see Football is Life. Let me know if folks have watched Ted. I've obviously I've watched the 2 seasons. It's been a breakout. I've loved it. So let us know in the chat if you've watched Ted Lasso as well. If you haven't, this might all feel a little weird, but it's okay. You can just listen to like the part of it. Ben, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen with you. Give me a thumbs
Wonderful.
up when you're good. Got it? Okay. Awesome. Okay, Dux. So our agenda for today. So first, we're going to show off the quiz. Then we're going to talk about how do you actually capture folks' responses? How do you capture that information? Then how do you send those responses for a calculator, right? How do we return a result? And then how do we do that in Webflow, right? So how do we take the responses, take what the user responded, return a number or whatever, and then show that to the user. And then we're going to do confetti and do it all at once. So first item, what is this quiz? Okay, so for folks who are not Ted Lasso fans, great show. Essentially, this quiz, I answer questions, and it's like one of those the Buzzfeed questions, right?
Yeah, very inspired. In fact, I think one of the most challenging pieces was writing the quiz. Like even if you're just wanting a sample, you're like, I've got to figure out like how do we do this? I literally was Googling how does BuzzFeed design and build their quizzes. It was pretty interesting. So
so walk me through it. So I pick one. Okay, my favorite restaurant, so Kebab Cafe, and then I pick. So I am. Is this a form? How should folks who are familiar to Webflow think about this?
it's not a literal form, but you can think about it like a form. What I did was I took a section for each question or a
Mm-hmm.
div for each question with a prompt, and then 4 items that are clickable, and they're just divs. And I changed the pointer type so people know that I should click this, right? And
Right.
give it a little interaction. And then when you click on it, JavaScript fires, and it saves a
Got it.
value that's tied to it. So
Let's run it. How about we run
there's
it?
an
So
ID on that item, and then yeah, go ahead
yes,
and run it.
yeah. Let's do like before we get into like the details here. So I pick Kebab Cafe. I'm angry. I like doing yoga with elderly women, and John Wooden is the person that inspires me. Do you know what this is going to result?
probably Roy
I'm
would be
always
my
Roy.
guess.
Roy, we got Roy. Awesome. So that was all done in the front end,
Yeah.
right? So we instantly return a result. So that was amazing. So yeah, let's go in and break it down. I don't know if that was a confetti moment, but I'm happy. Let's do some confetti. Let's do one confetti because we did the quiz.
Fun.
Okay,
Super fun.
let's dig into the Webflow side. So you said it's not a form. So I'm here and I'm happy to share this. If you go use case in the chat, I'm happy to share the Webflow website, and there's the GitHub repository that you can copy. So talk to me a little bit about how you structured this page, right? Oh, where's my
Yeah. So if
HTML?
well, that is a good question. The
Huh.
navigator seems to be missing.
Let me refresh it. That always fixes it. Uh-oh, is web up? The pressure on the stream.
We're doing it live.
Okay, we're good. We're good.
Doing it live.
We're good. Okay. No worries here. Okay, talk to me about the structure of this page.
Yeah. So if you scroll down, basically what I did is I created a div with each question, and that wraps that question. We have just a text element that says it's a prompt, choose X whatever, or what is your whatever, and then have a div that's a grid that it's using a CSS grid to lay these out. But these are answer wrapper boxes is the class I gave them, answer wrapper, and so it's an image, it's text, and then if you click over into the settings like the cogwheel. On the right-hand side, up at the top, if you have one of those selected, so if you select one of the answer wrappers now, you'll see that I added a custom, a couple of things. There's a custom attribute. There's ID at the top, 1-4. Right. So like this is question 1, option 4, and then I have a data answer, and that's tied to a specific character, right? So data answer is 2. And so, when you click on that, the JavaScript is basically saying this ID says your answer is 2. Let's set that, and that's how it works. And then I create an interaction. So, like when you click on it, it dims the others,
right?
And then it's a link that takes you to the next question, essentially like a section link, an anchor link.
Okay, so let me say that back to you because it's going to be important how we actually structure. The response. So you're saying that for every question, what you're gonna kind of track or log, right, is if I go to the wrapper, right, you're saying that this is answer 4.
Yep.
So if I pick Joe's Kansas City, what you want to log is this person picked 4 for question 1. So this is 1-1. Then you have 1-2. 1-3, 1-4, and each one of those answers has an attribute, right? So it's a data answer is 4. It can be 1 to 4, and then you do like an average to figure out which person it is. Is that understanding the structure of this page properly?
You've 1,000% hit it. Like that's exactly what it is.
Got it. So. Again, what I hope people take away from this is not necessarily like, oh, I want to create a quiz, but you can think of it as like, if you want to create something that says which pricing is right for me, and then you ask people like, are you a big team? Are you a small team, right? You can, in that page, without redirecting or frankly, logging information about that user, can say, oh, you are this type of user or that type of user, by logging each one of their answers and adding some logic in to return a specific response, right? So I think that's what's really interesting about this structure.
And like here's another.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, in another use case would be like, hey, if you have a spreadsheet that does some math on some financial figures and you don't want to reveal all of your formulas, you can put some fields in here where instead of grabbing that ID, like people fill out that value, you're using the value in those inputs, and when they hit the button, it takes it, puts it in the spreadsheet, does the math for you, returns the value back for the user. So a lot of fun use cases with this.
So I guess the if I was thinking of building this, Ben, my natural first question, the animate, like you're really good at creating like the little animations and things and going to the next section. But what would worry me most is how do I actually log, or like, how do I know that this person clicked Joe's Kansas City barbecue and therefore is a 4? And how do I track that? How do I get that number for that visit? Does that make sense as a question?
No, that's a great question, and that's all in that code. And so basically in the code, the very top of it, we have said, hey, if they click on things on this page with this ID, right, with any of these IDs, we're going to set that as X, and you can see that right at the top. 1 2 1 3 1 or 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4.
Let me bring
click
up
on
bigger...
that. We're going to make that answer 1.
Okay, so this is this. Yeah, so some people might be intimidated by this, but like, walk me through. You have it 4 times, right? 1 for every single, possible section. So talk me through this one little bit of what I think is JavaScript / jQuery. Talk me through this one piece of code, and let me know, folks, if we're too far away. This should be readable for you guys.
Yeah, the great part here is that Webflow includes jQuery. I know there's a lot of JavaScript people out there who are like, don't use jQuery. Well, it's built in. It's really easy. We used it here, and essentially what it's saying is it's displaying the IDs of those elements: 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4, and we're saying for each of those, when this is clicked on, let answer 1 equal, and you can see we're going to get that thing that was clicked in the data answer attribute, and then we're going to put it in local storage. So if you click on one of those 4 boxes, we're going to say answer 1 is that data URL attribute. Boom, let's store it. Now we've got it stored, and that's set. And that's what we're doing. And we have that repeated for all 4 of those questions. So that way it's, as they click, and they can click and change their mind, doesn't matter. It's just going to keep storing it. So it should work just fine for them.
So I get the structure of this. One question I have for you is, what is in? So you're saying set the variable answer 1 as this variable kind of answer 1. What does this log exactly? Does it log the value of what they clicked on? Right. So is it logging?
That's right. It
this right here. Let me go grab the little wrapper. So it's logging this data answer equal 4. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Got it. Okay.
That's exactly it. And so it pulls that, and then we're setting it local storage. So we just have it saved there. And then whenever they click the button, we're going to call that back up and use it to send it.
Okay. So let me, it is a little bit intimidating, but what I'm seeing here is that you're saying if a user clicks on any of these 4, what do you call them? IDs? Classes. You call them classes, right? In Webflow.
They're IDs. Yeah, they're IDs.
They're not classes. Yeah, they're IDs. Right. Go ahead and store in answer 1 what they selected, and that's going to be like the 4 answers, which has a numerical value that we then calculate on.
Okay. That's right. That's exactly it.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I think that, and again, we're not going to go through like the whole code. What I want to kind of show is just the abstract of it, and folks can play around with it. And if folks are interested, I'm happy to do like a session with you, Ben, where we write the code, right, and talk a little bit about jQuery, which I have I don't know if fond memories is the right word. I do have memories of learning it way back. So that is how we capture the responses, right? So at this point, when the person clicks all 4 and goes to the bottom, let me hide the agenda here. And we're going to talk about how do we send and receive responses. When they click show my results, you actually have to do that calculation somehow. So talk to me a little bit about, without talking about code, like what happens when I click show me my results?
Yeah, so essentially you click this button, and what we're doing is we're making an API call with NoCodeAPI, and that call is going to Airtable. So basically we're taking all of the responses, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're sending them to an Airtable base. And
Mm-hmm.
we're just creating a record in Airtable. We're creating a row in Airtable. And it's going to put, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 4, 4, 4, 4, or 1, 1, 1, 1, or whatever they
Right.
chose into an Airtable. And then we have a formula field that calculates a result. And so that formula field is basically just averaging. We're taking all the numbers, we're averaging them out. And with the 4-answer quiz, it's probably not the best. It should be longer, but this works. So we average those out, and then basically I'm using formulas on the rest of those rows too, and saying like, if the result is a
Right.
3, you are this person, and this is your description, and this is a link to the image we'll show the user. And so it's
Right.
just using Airtable formulas to decide what gets displayed. So it makes that calculation. When you click that button, it sends it, it figures out who you are, and then we just make one other call to get that specific record that you just created, and we
Right.
display all this information back to you in Webflow.
Okay. So just for folks, I opened up an Airtable base with a bunch of numbers. So I just want to walk people through here. So what happens, this is actually the response we just did, right? So if I look at this record, let me expand it. And Ben, I have some qualms with how you structured this base, but that's a whole other conversation that we'll have another time.
I knew this
And
was coming.
and I'm happy to talk about it at the end. So this was created via API about 11 minutes ago when we ran. This was our results, so you can see that it was created via API by Ben, because it's Ben's API key that's stored with NoCodeAPI. Our answer 1 was 3. Our answer 2 was 3. 3 for 3, and then 4 for answer 4, right? So that's getting those IDs that we clicked and using JavaScript to send them to Airtable. And in the logic part, which Webflow doesn't do today, right? We always think of a backend, but here it's actually just business logic. It's just saying, okay, there are 2 things we need to do. We need to run the average of every single response, a formula field in Airtable, and then we need to map that average to a specific character. So you're doing this using an if field, right? So you're saying, oh, sorry, there's like some stuff here, but let me just refresh. You're saying an if statement that checks what your result is versus the type of character that you should return. And this is where I have some qualms with how you've done this, but that's okay. If result calculus 4, return this text. If it's 3, return that text, so on and so forth. And then same thing for the image. So based on the average, I'm not sure why I'm getting these little things here, but that's okay. Return a different image that we're going to display. So 2 things happen. Well, I guess 3 things happen. We write the response in Airtable. Airtable does the calculations, and then we go and get that record to get these 2 results. So the result image and the result description are the 2 things we need. And so you mentioned you do it via NoCodeAPI. So let's actually go into the code and show where you do it. And then we'll jump into like, how do we actually do it in NoCodeAPI? But why NoCodeAPI? Why not just run a regular API call directly to Airtable's API? And then we can go into the specifics as to how to do that.
Yeah, there are a few reasons why you might want to use NoCodeAPI. The first and the very most important is this code is going to be in the page. And so, if I'm going to use the Airtable API, I have to have an API key in order to make this call, right? There's an API key that comes with Airtable in order for me to create things or to get things. And so that means if I want to use this in Webflow, it's going to go in my code, and people can just right-click, view source, see my API key, and then they can do terrible, awful things with my API or with my API key and Airtable. Now they can change things, delete things, what have you. They have a lot of power. So what NoCodeAPI does is it says, hey, you give us your API key, and we'll put all that together for you, and then we'll give you an endpoint that you can use. And what's great about NoCodeAPI is they also let you secure that to just a single domain. So I can say this will only work for my website. If somebody else takes this and tries to use it on theirs, it won't work. But I can kind of secure it. And then the third thing that it does is they do some caching. So if you're worried about running into Airtable, like let's say you're gonna have a lot of traffic and you're worried about running into Airtable API limits, well, this should help you with that, because NoCodeAPI is getting the results, and then they're kind of caching those for you and letting you make that call, and they're delivering that information for you instead of every time going to Airtable. So there's a few benefits to using it.
So I think, for folks who might be a little confused by this, is that when you do an API call using Airtable's API, you have to write this, a URL, just like here, but then question mark API key equals blah, 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 blah. So if you actually want to write an API call from Webflow or anything that is like a script on your website that is in the console, is in the actual HTML. Well, it's not in the HTML, but it is viewable by the end user. That's a big problem, right? Because then people can start writing to your base, doing all sorts of things, maxing out your APIs. Very, very bad practice. And so NoCodeAPI is actually like a different type of authentication. It's going to make sure that you have the right API call, the API key to write to this base. But then it's going to say, okay, well, here's another URL you can write to that will do the same thing, but we're going to add a layer of security that only allows it to be used from your domain. That means that if I was to go and kind of copy paste this, go to Postman, try to run it, it's not going to work because it's going to say, oh, this is a Postman URL. We are only allowed to run this from this Webflow URL that you've specified. So that is kind of why NoCodeAPI is interesting in this use case, because we are exposing the endpoint in the Webflow page. Big words. Let us know if there are any questions about that. So no difference between using this and the Airtable API, except that you're hiding this when the page so that people are not stealing your API key, which is a big no-no.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the caching too, depending on how much traffic you have. So
absolutely. I'm sure this is going to blow up, right? So after this stream, we're going to get millions of views on how to create a Ted Lasso quiz. We definitely need that caching in place to be able to do that. Caching for folks who aren't, is that there be Airtable's API has a limit. I don't remember what it was, 20 per second. I'm not sure what the exact limit is. But what NoCodeAPI can do is make sure you're always under that limit by seeing like, hey, this is the same result as before, or I have a little less traffic here. Let me spread out the traffic such that we're not hitting that Airtable API limit. A lot of math involved there that we're definitely not going to get into at the moment. Cool. Okay. So are we feeling comfortable? Why use NoCodeAPI? So I think the rule here is anytime you search your pages, inspect, and you could find the URL, it should never have the words XAPI key in it. Okay, cool. So let's actually
1,000%.
Yeah. So let's actually go ahead and run the API calls as an example from Postman, just so folks can understand how to use NoCodeAPI. So I already have my Airtable base connected, right? The Airtable base you guys just saw. So I just said like, hey, here's the Airtable base I want to use. And when I use this API in NoCodeAPI, it's going to kind of give me all of the options. So I can get records, I can create new records, I can update records, delete, and get a single record. So Ben, what is the first thing that we do when someone fills out the quiz?
So the very first thing that happens is we create the record. So we're making a post to create new records. And what I love about NoCodeAPI is that they let you test this, and then they actually give you example code that you can use, which is really great.
Okay, so I'm here on the actual endpoint. So this is the URL, and I want to create new records. And then I input the table name, which is quiz. And then I need to specify a body. Talk me through what I need to do to actually run this API call.
So you need to make sure that in the body, every field that you want to create matches the name of the, and the content's the same as in the Airtable base. So we're passing numbers through, and you can see that the names of our columns are answer 1, no spaces, capital A, answer 2, answer 3, answer 4. So we're just going to use those same exact names here. And we put those in quotes. They already have like the little brackets set up for us, and they give you example code when you start. So you just go through and change this to answer 1, is 1 as a sample value here, comma, answer 2 to whatever you want it to be, answer 3, answer 4, and then you can click the button that says click and test this API, and then it's going to make a test call for you, which is really, really fun.
Okay.
And they give you, then once you make that test API call and it's successful, they give you this link now that you can use, this endpoint that you can go and put in your code and say, like, this is the endpoint I'm going to use when I make my call.
Okay. So if I click and test the API, it's going to go ahead and create the record, right? So if I create this,
That's right.
body param is required. I think I do have a body param. I'm trying to copy paste that, click and test. There we go. Okay, so it should have created a record, and what it returns is the record ID, right? And it
Yes,
returns,
and that's the magic.
right, and it returns the whole record, right? So it's saying this is all the values in the record. So if we actually go to Airtable, we see 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the record that was just created. Now, we could do the same thing from Postman, right? So I imagine I could
Yes.
copy paste this URL in Postman like I would any others. You know, no, I don't need any authentication, right? Because it would be authenticated on the NoCodeAPI side. And right now I'm not restricting based on the where I'm using it from. So in this case, it should work, right? So let me just go take the body, take this one right here, and go into raw like that. So I'm saying, okay, go ahead and run this API call with this body. Let's send it. Oh, it should be an array. Whoops. That is
Well,
array.
actually, I think you're okay. You might need to change your text to like over the far right hand side.
Oh,
where
it's just
says,
JSON.
GraphQL. You might want to change that to JSON. Yeah.
Okay, let's give it a try. I did add the actual array, which might be a specification. You need to send like an array of the records you want to update, because you can create multiple records, right? So if we wanted to create 2, you can set an array of 2. I think that's the case. Let's try that. So we're saying 1 record with these values. Okay, and there we go. So if we go back here, we now have a second, but that is, I'm able to do this from Postman because I haven't restricted the domain from which I'm pinging NoCodeAPI from. But I could say like, hey, if this is from any URL that is not my website, don't let it work, right? And Postman would actually block. But what's great is you don't see an API key, right? So this URL has no API key, and it works, right?
And the error you would get in that case would be restricted. It would say like you're not allowed to use this endpoint.
Right. Okay. And so actually, like that was the first example, right? So that was writing the results. How do we retrieve the results? So there were 2 fields that we wanted to get. We wanted to get the result and actually 3: the result, the description, and the image. How do we go about retrieving that information using NoCodeAPI?
Yeah, essentially what we're doing is we make that API call and we say create this record, which we did, and then when you create it, it gives you an ID for that record. Like that's part of that response. And then we can use NoCodeAPI here, their option to get a single record, which is down at the bottom there. And we can use that to then get a single record. So that's what we're going to do is we'll say, hey, get this record and show us the information. And then we write that to the page in Webflow.
Yeah, so right here, we're saying go to this particular URL right here, and then return, well, it returns the whole record, right? But here, what we need is these 3 fields right here, and then you display those on the page. So let me actually go to Webflow. Actually, let's go to the code and understand how you actually display that. So I just maybe, does everyone understand the API call, right? So there are 2 API calls that happen. One, sending the responses to Airtable. Airtable using a few formula fields, which are the right fields sort of to do this, but then return a response that we then want to show in Airtable. So Airtable here is doing the kind of what we call like logic, right? It's doing a little bit of logic, a little bit of formula to return the response. Quick question, Ben. Couldn't you have just written out the logic in code in your code itself, right? That if formula could have just been right here, right? You wouldn't have needed
Yeah.
Airtable.
Yeah, I could have said if, X, Y, and Z, whatever, average this out, give me the average, this is the result. If the result is this, but this code goes from quickly being, 80 to 100 lines of code to 2 to 400 lines of code.
Right,
And
right.
and it sort of takes the power out of my hand. Airtable has so much that we can leverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so not only do we have the ability for it to calculate things, but there are scripts and automations and all these things that can happen.
Right.
And so having that tool at our disposal is super powerful. And for me, this was more of like a test, a proof of concept. Can I do
Right.
this? And then, okay, now what can I dream up that I can do with Airtable and really push it to its limit?
Yeah, and I think there's actually, when I was thinking about this, there's a few other advantages to separating your backend from like your actual code. Is that, let's say you're like, hey, I'm way off, right? Doesn't make everyone's getting Roy, right? Like if we look at the responses, like we can see like, okay, 75% of people are Roy. Does that make sense? Can we adjust the algorithm? It's an if statement, but people like to, call it an algorithm, to say like, oh, we actually balance this out a little more. So because we have this like backend, we're logging what people are answering, so we can actually look at it. And what's great about this is like you as a developer are separating the code from the decision making, in that someone else can come in and be like, oh, we need to change this a little bit, right? So maybe if you get 2.8, you're something else, and you don't actually have to write code to be able to understand that. So it creates like a separation of responsibilities. Which is really interesting, especially when you kind of generalize this to apps, right? So you got your code, and your
Yeah,
code is going to
makes
work no
it
matter
much more
what.
collaborative.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I thought that was really cool as well. Then you could create like
Yeah.
graphs and analyze this information in a way that you couldn't if you were just giving back the response without actually logging the information. So I think it's really cool. Where were we? We were at, okay, how do you actually run the API call from the code? So let's go here.
Yeah.
So talk me through this first API call, which is right here.
Yeah, so essentially, perfect. If you had scrolled up just a little bit there, we're basically saying when you click this, we're going to say, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get that what I call result wrapper, as I've defined it. That's basically the button that they click. I'm saying,
Right.
hey, get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. And then I have a div with a loading GIF in it that's hidden from everybody. And I'm saying, hey, while we're looking this up, show them this loading thing so they know something's happening in the background. And then this next little bit's just writing a custom error message. But then basically we're saying, let answer 1, let answer 2, let answer 3, let answer 4. Let's go get those things we stored in local storage. Let's get them and define them. And then basically we start to make the call. We say like, hey, here's the call you're going to make. And then you can see the body here. Answer 1 is that variable we set, answer 1, answer 2, answer 2. So we're building that body that we just built in Postman. We're just building that out right here. And then whenever you go down here, you can see like this is the endpoint I'm hitting. Boom, that's the NoCodeAPI. And then that first option says, if there's an error, let's do that first. It'll skip down to the catch and display that. Or we're going to say, okay, then the data, let my result, so the result for the person equals the data ID. So we just created a record, get the ID of that record, and then let's set it in local storage. So it gets set in local storage, so the ID of that Airtable record. And then we finally run what's called pull results. So we've created the record, now let's pull it. So we're just it's the same thing now. We're doing the same thing, except we're saying, okay, let the result ID be what we set in local storage, which was that record.
Yeah.
And then on this call, because we're getting that specific record, the URL is dynamic. We were saying like, here's the endpoint plus this variable. So this record, we're going to get that record. And then we're going to make the call. And it's the same thing. Once we get the data, let's go ahead. And it's the same thing. We have an error handling. And then, but when that data comes in, And then now we're just using JavaScript to build an element in HTML.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're saying, let the content target, I have an element called result target in Webflow. It's just a div that has the ID result target. That's going to be where we put everything. And then I say, let UR equal a paragraph element, and then the attribute, we give it a class and result name, we're just creating that. And how I did this was I actually built it in Webflow, viewed it in the browser, inspected it, and I just copied the HTML and looked at it on one side and just recreated it in JavaScript. And then this is just putting all of that back on the page. And then at the very bottom, we're just saying, let's clear local storage. Let's delete everything that we added there. And then let's remove that loading element. So now that the loading element is done, let's remove that. And then it displays the result.
So I know folks who are going to like look at this and be like, oh, how would I ever write this? I remember learning some jQuery and some JavaScript. Once you understand Webflow, it's actually really easy to then understand this type of query, right? It's just saying add a P element, add a paragraph, write this text in that paragraph, show this image. And this is actually just kind of like, you can almost map this to Webflow visual development. So what we're going to do is we're going to let people play around with this. So if you go use case in the chat, I'm going to do that now. I don't know if it runs when I do it, but I think we'll give the GitHub repo and, oh no, it's base. I think it's in base. There we go. Okay, we got both. There we go. Okay, so we got both of those.
Yep.
So go ahead and grab the GitHub repo and the Webflow project and kind of play around with this and understand how you could use this in your page, which will be a little different. But what's great about this is it returns in the front end the response from Airtable. So I want to do the quiz one more time and talk through what's happening as I'm filling it out. Or Ben, you talk to me about what happens as I'm filling it out, and then we'll do some confetti, and then I'll talk to you about ways we can improve this from Airtable and from some suggestions in the chat. So
I'm ready to hear it.
Okay, so
I'm ready to hear it. So
basically,
you're selecting one of the 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4.
Right.
And you're saying this is my favorite. So it sets that value from the data URL. And we just stored it in local storage. In fact, you can even show people that if you want.
Oh, right. Yeah, we can go to the expect, right? Yeah, totally. So let's do that. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Let me pick a different one. And then how would I actually
and if
see
you go to
the console? Can I see my local
so
storage?
Go to application in the console. Yeah. If you go to the application tab there, up at the top, and then you go to local storage. And if you open that up, you should be able to select for this page, and you can see answer 1, answer 2. It's just being stored there, and you can see the values that are being set.
Oh wow! Okay, this is really cool. So I was actually I was seeing it in console, but you have like a proper whole app storage. Okay, so I like to do. I don't want to get Roy. So no, this is Roy doing yoga with elderly women. Also Roy, I think. Fancy dinner parties.
That's Roy.
That. That's Roy as well. No, that's not Roy.
No, that's Rebecca.
Okay, good. And who inspires me? Definitely not Gordon Ramsay. Megan, Bobby? Bobby is not Roy.
Bobby is not Roy. That's Coach Beard.
Okay, good. Let's see what I get. So I've got 1, 3, 1, 2. And how would I see the API call? It would be a network, right? So here, when I click this button, I'm going to be able to see the 2 API calls. All right, so let's click Show Me My Results. There we go. So that's API call number 1, API call number 2, and then I'm Beard. And that's a returning and then fetching the JPEG. All right, that was exciting. Let me do some confetti here. That was really exciting. Oh, did I mess it up? Confetti? All right. Who's gonna
Yeah.
be like go out and build applications on Webflow after this? I feel pretty jazzed up to like put this in action. Um, maybe quizzes are like I think a perfect starting point for folks. You know, and then you can build like pricing
I think so.
calculators. You
I
can
think
do a
so.
bunch of stuff.
Yes, yes, exactly. And this was a good place to start. So I think Colleen said that the preview link wasn't working. I'm just going to post this back in the chat so it's
Oh,
there.
awesome.
Um, everybody should have it there now. Um, yeah, and so this is a great use case. Quizzes, calculators, anything that where you can find the power of Airtable. Now, here's what I did know, Aaron. I knew I was going to come on this stream. We were
Yeah.
going to show this off, and I knew you were going to take issue with my Airtable base. And
I
so
it's
I'm ready to learn from the
yeah.
champ here.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. So, but first, I think before, I think there's a good point from Mold, if I'm saying their name right, which is when. So the first improvement is actually when you write this create new records API call, right? You actually receive what's in the record. So that second API call can be inferred. So I'm going to create a new record. I'm gonna 1, 2, 3, 4. You'll notice in the response, you actually get the response, right? And so that because this is
Yeah,
calculated
and
before, couldn't you use this as like what you show people?
I could, and I actually did in my first iteration. But I wanted to. So there was a use case that came to mind where maybe Airtable is going to take a second to calculate something for me, and maybe it's not going to be quite
Right,
as instantaneous as I want it to
right,
be.
right.
And so I wanted to play with the proof of concept of give it a second. And my next play was I even did this a little bit. I added a bunch of fields and did a bunch of calculations, and I used a set timeout to just hey wait just a second or so before you
Yeah,
call and get this response, just to
yeah.
make sure everything is finished. So that was my use case, but totally you can do it with just the one as well.
Yeah.
And that's a great point. I should have kind of called out that this is kind of what I was thinking. This was a total experiment for me on my end.
No, and I think it's a good point. So if you don't need that timeout, if you don't need that time and you expect the response to be really quick, you can save. But I think we're like, this is in the weeds, right? Like if you're running 2 API calls instead of one,
Yes,
no coder
totally.
is gonna like, talk
Yeah,
shit.
yeah.
So I think that's number one. I think the other one that's really interesting is the way you've structured your base, which is very much you've structured it as an Excel person would structure their base, right? And I know you're an Excel person, and I could see that
Brutalist.
um, because what's really interesting is if you have a characters table, right, where you have their image, you have their description, and you have their name, right? So this if statement could just be a lookup, right? Because what you're saying here is get the average result, get which character
Yep.
they are, but then you could create a link to say this response is this character, and then go and get their description and get their image. And you might be like, why would I ever do that? This feels so much more efficient. But let's say your quiz, you need to update something, right? Let's say you want to update and be like, you
Yeah.
know what? I need to change the image. I need to change the description. I want to add more characters potentially. Well, then instead of just adding a record in your character table, you have to then go and be like, oh shit, like what is my calculation logic? What is my description? And update
Yeah.
in different places where if you're
Yeah.
using the relational database structure, you can do that in one go. And all of this can be linked together. Relational databases, baby.
So can you show us this real quick? Is this like something you could
I
spin up, or
think
is this like a more in depth time?
I think it would take a little bit of time, right? Because I think the challenge here is that you want to turn a formula into a separate field that then inputs that into that result description and then looks up the rest of the values. And you would need, you can do that using Airtable automations, right? But you would need a trigger, right? And I would have to like make sure, it might be a little finicky to say like, oh, when this updates, get the value from this
Yep.
formula field to then create a linked record, right? Now
Yeah.
if we've lost anyone before, we've definitely lost them now, right? So it would be a little, it would come to my stream where we write
It's
code and then
true.
we're no coders, but it would be a little finicky. And I think actually like I'm being very difficult with you because you're not going to update the descriptions, right? You're not going to do all those things. And so this is like a really easy way to do it, right? Also, by the way, Airtable hosts your images, right? That way you don't have to have a Webflow URL here. You can actually take the URL from the image right here as well, right? So that's more for
Yep.
like if you really want to like scale, that would make sense.
Yeah, and I played with this a little bit while you're talking about it. And that's one of the reasons I did 2 calls, because I was like, oh, call this, look this up, run an automation. And yeah, it takes a second. So you're like,
Absolutely.
okay, I need two. And
Right.
so I ended up going back to just the ifs. But I mean, you make a great point, because I was doing the same thing, and I was dreaming about all of these different things that I could do with it. I literally was trying to sit down and think about, like, oh, what are the really fun things we can create with this,
Yeah.
and how can we empower people. And so anyway,
I think,
I
you
love
know,
it. I love that call out, because I think you're right.
I think maybe this is where we'll end. And folks, let us know in the chat if you've got some like suggestions for what we could do. But I think there's been like this really big dream is like you input what you need. So like let's say I'm looking for a form builder, and you're like, okay, do you want to take payment? Do you want to what's your budget? Do you need to integrate with any of these tools? Right. And then folks like kind of pick what they want. And then on the back end, you're like, here's what tool we would recommend under those situations. This would actually be like a really good structure for that. And especially that in the back end, you would need some slightly sophisticated logic, right? To be able
Yep.
to say like, okay, here's something that fits all of your criteria. And I know a lot of people have tried it, but it was always like very static. It was always like, uh, uh, sorry, can you still hear me? I just got a call on my phone. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
No, I can't
You
hear you.
cut
Just give me a
you
second.
cut in and out just for just a second. Okay. Well, I like
Hey,
hearing
can you hear
that.
me? Yeah, there's some echo there. We should be
Yeah, I
good.
can hear you.
Okay, great. We're back. Sorry about that. No, we're good. I have messed up on the stream enough times to know how to catch it up. No worries. We're back. Okay. So, sorry, I lost what you just said. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, get out of my head, because I was thinking the same thing. Like, how can I recommend a stack for people of no code tools
Right.
based on what, like, this is one of the things that came to mind for me. I know I've built some other things in sheets, like where it calculates some things. As a former basketball coach, I have
Mm,
some calculation tools for coaches players. I was like, ooh, what can I do that's fun with this too? I don't know, I was really excited about the possibilities, and I just haven't seen a lot of people do right to the back end, right to the front end, without creating their own systems. Like, I've done this in the past, but I literally spun up my own environment in Heroku, made a call
mhm.
to it. Created my own webhook, had my own code that I wrote in Heroku that said, when you hit that, do X, Y, and Z. And it's so fun. No Code API is so powerful, because it lets you say, I don't need to do all of that. Like, I can use this tool, and it's so great. And it looks like Mode said he's working on something where we're not going to need that JavaScript code soon. So I don't know. Stay tuned, I guess. That's
Awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, a few things here. So thank you,
Oh
Ben,
no, I
for
lost you
coming on.
again, Aaron. I can't
What?
hear you.
Oh no. I got this. I got this. 1 second. I know folks on the stream could still hear me, so it's just you. Just give me a sec here. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, there we go. I got you. Okay. Well, I was thanking you. So thanks so much for coming on the stream. This was a pleasure. I hope what people leave here with is like, I can build an app on Airtable with a tiny bit of glue. And I just wanted to thank you for all the resources and everything you do for the no code community on behalf of myself and everyone as noob coders. We all appreciate it. And yeah, just a huge thanks for coming on and for everything you do.
Thanks for having me. And for people who are here, stay tuned because we'll have Aron on the podcast very soon to talk some stuff too. So we'll trade back off. We'll trade back off.
I fear that this is what's gonna happen if I come on the podcast. You're gonna bait me into talking shit, and I'm worried about that. I'm worried that with Jake, Lacey, and I'm gonna be baited because I have strong opinions that disagree with most people.
That's what the podcast is for.
I know.
The best part is the podcast isn't live. We can edit it. We can edit it. So
yeah, I will accept the invite. I will get some coaching.
Yes.
I will have calming tea before. And is Jake gonna be? Because if Jake is there and he's talking about, I don't know if we could do an episode with Jake and I. But I'm joking.
No,
I would love to come.
It'll just be Lacey, Matt, and I.
Okay, no, I'm joking. I would love to come. It would be a pleasure. And if you guys get any good snippets out of me, you're free to share them. It'll be a lot of fun. No, but huge. So if folks don't listen to the Visual Dev Podcast, go ahead and check it out. Definitely where you get kind of a summary of news and just enough controversy to kind of get us through month to month. So huge thanks. Yeah, and so Andy, you can watch back the stream actually right now. It's instantly available. Huge thanks to you. I hope people will be motivated to write some code, learn, build applications on top of Airtable, Webflow, NoCodeAPI, and others. At the end of the show, we're gonna have resources for everything: GitHub, the link to the Webflow project, NoCodeAPI, all that good stuff. And Ben, come back. We'll write some code next time. It'll be huge fun. Really appreciate you coming on. Bye, y'all.
Would love to. Thanks for having me, Aron. Appreciate it.
Bye, Ben. Talk